Untitled Chapter, and along with my colleagues in the front here, we are here to introduce you to the ATNS resource tool. What we'll be doing is we'll just be giving you a quick introduction to the tool, a little bit of background behind the tool, and then just a little introduction of how the tool works and also the benefits that you're going to be getting with the tool itself.
You can see this, we started off, one more. Okay, a little bit of background to the tool. ATNS was committed to evolve their paper-based systems into electronic systems, and one of the systems that we wanted to evolve was the paper-based rostering system. And ATNS wanted to buy a product so that we can have electronic rostering, scheduling that can also be maintained electronically and also archived and saved electronically. The project started off, we selected 7 key users and 3 subject matter experts, and they were selected from all the different stations in the country, and we were basically tasked with testing the product as we received new versions from the supplier. We were also then responsible for creating training material, which we did, and then we went to all the different stations and we actually trained all the employees across the country, all the stations that we were coming from. We were also responsible for, we were used in the implementation of the resource tool at all the different stations, and some of us were also consulted when it came to the biometrics installation. A little bit of overview of the tool. 2 years later, after this project is now done, we have an electronic scheduling tool, which is for ATS staff, and it is a tool that can be accessed remotely for employees either at home, but it can also be accessed at work. Completely electronic, that can be updated and maintained, and also then filed and archived electronically. It will be linked to a biometric system that will be implemented through all the stations in ATNS. It will be integrated with departments like payroll and also with human capital. And all the information that's coming from the biometrics will be going into the resource tool to create reports that will be exported to payroll. And we'll also be able to import information from units like human capital into the tool, and these informations like employee information that will be updated and maintained in the resource tool itself. ATNS, like any other company, we're responsible, we have to comply with certain rules and regulations when it comes to rostering. And these are either set by CIA or it's either negotiated by the unions, and all these labor rules are built into the tool, which means that when the rostering person, or we like to call it the planner, will always create a schedule in the tool that complies with all the labor rules. Now you can also put global parameters into the resource tool, which is a little bit more station specific, and these will be things like shift durations or time in between shifts, and all these things are planned or programmed into the resource tool, and when you create a schedule you will always be complying with the labor rules, so you will never create a schedule that is illegal. Now, how do we do it? Like, creating a schedule is like any other process. It starts with a beginning, a requirement, and it ends with something or a result. And like any other process, there's different steps that you have to do in this process. So the resource tool or the creating a schedule is exactly the same thing. So let me go through this process. First step in this process is creating a shift pattern. Now, it sounds complicated, but really isn't. Basically what it means is that the planner will be responsible for creating a pattern that consists of all the different shifts that you will be assigning to the employees in a schedule. Now this is one of those steps that you'll only do once. Once you start using the tool in the beginning, you'll create your pattern, and this pattern will use every time you create a new cycle. Just import the pattern into the schedule and you use the same shifts to assign it to the employees. Now, some units use something what they call a cyclic plan, and it is just a forward rotation predictive roster. Now, not all the units in ATNS does that. Places like Cape Town does, and all it means is that you have maybe a 7-day stretch, and it's a cycle, and it's 2 mornings, 2 afternoons, 2 night shifts, and it's a predictive cycle that happens all the time, and you can actually plan a schedule according to that. Now, the nice thing about this tool is that you can use that type of rostering in the tool. The tool can cater for that if that is decided that that's the type of rostering that you want to do. So now that you've got your pattern and you've got your cyclic plan, it starts with the schedule generation. Now this is the thing that you're going to be doing every month. What will happen is the planner will create a blank schedule with all the employees that is available to him in the schedule. He will import this shift pattern and then manually assign the shifts to the staff, the available staff. Now that's the manual way of doing it. The tool has also got an automated way of doing it where you press the optimizer, and the tool itself, based on the label rules and global parameters that you've put into the tool, will create a schedule within minutes, assigning all the shifts available to it to the available staff according to the rules. The employee portal is the view that the employees will log into. So once you have created a schedule, the employees will log into the portal by a username and password, and they can now see their schedule. This is once the schedule has been created and has been published. This is also where the employees will be logging into, and they will be putting their preferences, or they will enter in their leave request, and they'll also do their shift swap request or shift exchange and day off exchanges. Now, the manager has two plans that they can create in the resource tool. The first one of it is the annual plans. That is like a year planner for your leave. So as the manager receives the leave request, they will put it into an annual plan. And once the annual plan has been published in the resource tool by the manager, it will automatically be visible in the schedule. So when the planner steps up and he wants to create a brand new schedule and the annual plan has been published, that annual plan will automatically appear in the schedule, and the planner can actually plan around that leave. The second plan that we can use is the training plan. Training plans are just for periods of training, so it's maybe somebody going to the college or somebody going to study or something. You can actually assign an instructor and a student to a training plan for a certain period, and once that year training plan has been published, again it will be visible in the resource tool, and the planner can assign shifts around that training plan. Daily activities. Now all this basically means is once a schedule has now been created, you've got your annual plan and your training plan inside the tool, the schedule's been published and it's visible to all the employees. Daily activities can be managed by the manager, and all that basically means is if there's a day-to-day change or an unforeseen change, or somebody books off sick, or there's sick leave, or a shift needs to change, the manager can access the tool on a daily basis and maintain the tool. Employee information, this is a really nice feature about this tool because all the employee information is imported from human capital into the resource tool. This is information like your medical expiry dates. It'll be like your annual checks, your standards checks, your proficiency, those kind of checks. It'll all be updated in the CRS system and imported into the resource tool. It can either be maintained by the information coming from the CRS, or it can actually be maintained by the manager or the planner. This is also information when it comes to contact numbers, email addresses, all those kind of things can be maintained in the resource tool. Biometrics. So ATNS has embarked on the second project called the biometric system. They have decided to install biometric scanners in all the units in ATNS, and this biometric system will be linked to the resource tool, and all the data that has been captured on the biometric system will be imported into the resource tool. And this information will basically be used to generate reports that will be exported to places like payroll. So the reports, here we go. It'll be overtime claims, it'll be OJTI claims, all those kind of paper-based reporting systems that we have at the moment will all be done electronically via the resource tool and exported every month after the end of the cycle. Looks a bit intense, but that's basically what the information looks like. It's a little bit daunting once you've worked with it well. Okay, phase 2 of the project we started last year in June, and we decided to incorporate other paper-based systems into the resource tool to make it a little bit more electronic. And one of the ones that we've installed was the memos and instructions. Now currently, your memos and instructions are on a file, on a paper-based system sitting in the tower, and when you want to read your memos and instructions, you go and read it up. So what we've decided is now the memos and instructions will now be available in electronic format in the resource tool. So employees can log onto the tool, they can read the instructions and the memos, and they can acknowledge the fact that they've read it. It will be date and time stamped, and it can be managed by managers. The nice thing about the memos and instructions, it can be accessed remotely as well. The second thing that they've decided to import is the pre-flight information bulletins. These are the things that we receive from KU. Also another paper-based system that will be electronically available in the tool. And this is one of those systems that they've decided that the employees will be required to acknowledge that they've read the pre-flight information bulletin before they take over in position. So it'll be date and time stamped, and the managers can control to see who has actually read the pre-flights or not. And in the greater scheme, this will actually just improve on the safety and efficiency of operations, because it is all station-specific relevant information that comes in the PIBs, which means the employees will have this information before they actually sit down on position. Training logs is the last paper-based system that we've decided to incorporate into the resource tool. Currently, your students will be walking around with a paper book that the instructors enter information into. This will now be an electronic training log in the resource tool. So it will be the manager's responsibility to create an electronic training log for each student for each discipline. And once your training is completed, the training log will be closed and then archived electronically for future use. Now, how this will basically work is once you have a training session, the instructor will be responsible to log into the resource tool and create a training log page within the training log. It's all electronic. And then he will enter all the information for the shift. It also will calculate the criteria or the objectives for the training and also leave comments. The student will then be required to log into the resource tool as well, acknowledge the fact that he's read it, and also the manager can log into it and actually see the progress of the student. Again, once the training is complete, the training log will be closed and archived for future use. So it's all going to be electronic. And that is basically the end of my presentation. Like I said in the beginning, ATNS is striving to be a paperless, or we're trying to move away from paper-based systems. With this resource tool, we're embracing new technology, and we are trying to move into that environment where everything is going to be electronically available for employees and managers and staff. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'm quite happy to answer anything. Okay, so you're saying once the tool has been implemented, it will be maintained. There is a key user in each station. There's 7 of us, and all the major stations has got key users, and we are basically the go-to person to monitor and control it. The planners ultimately, when it is up and running and it is perfect, the planner is the person that's going to be creating the schedule, and they will basically make sure that everything runs smoothly. The managers are also, the pool managers are also going to be trained on this tool, and they have to maintain it on a daily basis to make sure it's running. The biometrics, they are key individuals at each station that has been trained to use the biometrics, and they will obviously also be responsible for maintaining to make sure it works properly. I think the processes when it comes to reporting that's going to be created and exported, I think those processes are still being looked at. But at the end of the day, that's going to be the end result that we want. We want to have an automated system where reports are created and exported. It'll just alleviate all the paper systems that we have at the moment and probably also make it a little bit more efficient. Something I forgot to add is at the moment we're using a paper-based register system as well. When you're signing on and off to get to work, it's a big file. This will also replace that, because you will also now be signing on and off duty on a biometric system, which means eventually that paper register book will also disappear and everything will be electronic. Now, when you're signing on and off, you can go over your shift, under your shift, and your manager can update these dates. So basically it's moving away from anything that's paper-based and having a completely electronic system that is linked to the biometrics. Answer. Huh? Anything else? Sorry? Yeah, absolutely. Nobody likes change. It is especially controllers, we don't like change. I think once people start seeing the benefit of the tool and how relatively easy it is to work. Eventually they will come around. At the moment we are in that process of getting people from the paper system into electronic system. So yes, there probably will have to be some policies that have to be changed once the project is up and running. We are still in that phase. We are very much at the moment, the tool is working. People are using the biometrics, people are signing on and off. We are still in the process of making sure that the export information is still correct, that the information from the biometrics is correct. So we're still in that phase 2 or wrapping up of phase 2. Hopefully by the time when we get there, everybody will be on the same side to say that this is actually a very simple, effective way of doing scheduling. But like I said, in the beginning you do have resistance, but people are changing, people are overcoming. There's a lot of changes happening at the moment, and I think everybody's just throwing themselves into the idea that this could be a benefit. I think once they see the benefit, it's going to be great. Yeah. And also just to keep in mind that the rules that we were complying with for the last 20, 30 years when it comes to rostering and what we're allowed to do and not allowed has not changed. The only thing that's happened now is we've put it into the tool, and you will never create a schedule that will contravene that rule. So we will never be able to create a schedule that is illegal. There will always be an illegal, and even if you're trying to make changes to it, if it's not legal, it actually won't allow you to do it. It'll throw a big red sign to say, and a big red unhappy face to say you can't do it. So very, very legal system, provided you've put the right information into it. Anything else? Thank you very much for your time. Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, so at the moment we are busy wrapping up the last part of this project. I'm not 100% sure when we're going to be completely finished, but we're on the last couple of months of it. Who would they approach if they want to see more about this project and approach, and then who do they speak to? If you look behind you, there's an Indian lady there. She is the mastermind of the resource tool. You cannot find anybody that knows anything more about it. So she's probably the best person to talk to say if you have any other information on that. It's quite excited to see what it's going to look like when it's completely up and running. Like I said, at the moment we're still finalizing a few things, but it's going to be great when it's working. So if you really do want information, we can always put you in touch with somebody that can show you exactly how it's going to work. Thank you very much for your attendance.
How does it work? Don't work, no? So I'm gonna use this.
15, once again with 25 minutes being allocated to each presenter. We kindly ask that all presenters make their way to the respective areas. There has been a slight change of program. Presentations are as follows. Area 1, from counting errors to creating potential for resilience in managing safety, Matita Chabalala from ATNS. Area 2, Space Solutions for Aviation, Dr. Leanne McKinnell, SANSA. Area 3, Emotional Intelligence and Aviation, Kane Manganya from ATNS. And then Area 4, RPS, Operations and Safety, Marcus Cornier, Visual Aid. I'll repeat. Area 1, from counting errors to creating potential for resilience in managing safety, Matita Chabalala. Area 2, Space Solutions for Aviation, Dr. Leanne McKinnell. Area 3, Emotional Intelligence and Aviation, Kane Manganya. Area 4, RPS, Operations and Safety, Marius Cronier. Ladies and gentlemen, presentations will be starting promptly in 3 minutes.
Middle center. Yeah, I hope you're not asking questions. Give me ideas.
All right, let me start. I will be presenting to you from counting errors to creating. All right, just briefly as to tell you what I'm going to be talking about, the presentation outline, introduction, the science of strategic weakness. Okay, we'll talk more about that. Safety currently, how do we say safety currently, and then also what do you mean by safety differently, okay? Use of resilience, and then lastly, the bottom line. That's where I'll be summarizing what I will have. In 1921, it's a long time ago, Albert Einstein, when he was delivering his lecture about geometry and experience, as far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality. How do we manage safety? We currently manage safety through numbers. we put a number out there, and that will determine whether we are safe or not. For example, we put a 2, and then we say it's probably if you are you have incident that are 1.99, you are not safe. When you are 2.01 or whatever number, you are safe. Is that really the case? I mean, 1921, Albert Einstein said, this problem was not the right way. So how did we get to where we are? So how did you get here? You hear every time organizations coming up and saying, we need to improve our safety performance. What does that mean? Essentially what they mean is that we need to move numbers around. He proposed that, in fact he came up with the, with the triangle. So this one on the far right. Okay? So he said, sorry, for a major injury to happen. Hello, 1, 2, okay. He said for a major, can you guys hear me? Oh, okay. For a major injury to happen, there has to be at least 29 injuries and then also 300 incidents. So the thinking around that is that if you want to know how safe you are, you need to count the number of errors that have happened. And that will tell you whether you're safe or not. Okay? The interesting part about Hensberg is that his research, even today, there's no data that came from him. He did his research in an insurance company when people were claiming for insurance claims, and then also in the workplaces he interviewed supervisors to gather his data. So he came up with this idea, and this idea we're still using it today, 2016. I'll show you later that's not necessarily true. And then there were people after him who sort of modified his his triangle. They said, by the way, no, well, there has to be at least 600 unsafe acts and then 30 incidents and then 10 near misses, and then we'll have an accident. So, because they're not getting to these numbers, it became a numbers game now. Okay. Other people came later and modified it further, realizing that whatever was conceptualized there was not necessarily a reflection of reality. So pushing numbers. So most probably years later we'll have another one somewhere there that not only that won't say 3,000 and 300,000 incidents, most probably to say million incidents before an accident happens. So it becomes a numbers game. So we manage safety through numbers of some sort. Not forgetting what Einstein said in 1921, by the way. Alright, so the evolution of safety. Safety has evolved. We talk about the age of technology. At that time when we looked at safety, the major enemy of safety was technology. There was a problem with mechanical design of aeroplanes. And then we changed, we moved, and then we got to the age of human factors, where we looked at humans as hazards. And to arrest the hazards of human beings, we had to put rules, procedures, processes in place to ensure that people follow the rules. And then later, there came the age
where we look at engineering systems, humans as heroes, safety to those who are familiar with that. And then now we're talking about the age of cognitive complexity. By the way, there are certain things that we cannot control. We have this belief as human beings that we have the ability to control. And as a tall order, we manage safety through what we call behavior-based safety, with the notion that we have the ability to control human behavior. And we know for a fact that there's no one individual who's got that ability. So we need to look at other ways of how to manage safety. Safety performance has actually plateaued. There's not much we can do to ensure that we are safe. We have done all what that we could do. Now we need new ways of looking at safety. So that's why there's introduction of resilience engineering. We need to understand safety. So currently we see safety by counting the negatives. While looking for something, but you can't, we're counting the negatives. So we indirectly measuring safety. Is it a sign of strategic weaknesses? Is it not time that we change the way we're thinking about safety? I put up these 3 accidents that recently or not so recent happened. Okay. What is common to all of them is that these guys believed they were safe. For example, the Deepwater Horizon accident, for 6 years in a row, there was no single incident that was reported. That goes against what Heinsberg said. They shouldn't have this. This shouldn't have happened. In fact, a year before this accident happened, they got accolades to say, well, you are a model of safety. Auditors, when they came to audit them, I mean, they just went and do paperwork just for the sake of doing paperwork. Because they believed they were safe. Guess what was happening? It's what we call so let's go further. So this demonstrated the vulnerability to unanticipated events. So things in today's world, they happen unanticipated. You cannot for sure predict what is going to happen in the future. So we need a different way of how we look at things. Do we need to do better or more intensively what we already do? You know, when there's an incident or accident, we go back into the operations and say, guys, please do better, try harder. Eh? Make sure you are vigilant. Make sure this does not happen again. And then we stand back. We assume that everything will be okay. Or is the current safety paradigm itself challenged? I believe the second part is correct. So how do we currently see safety? In actual fact, this idea came in 1911. In fact, around about 1903, 1905 there, where when they looked at safety, they saw people as problems. Surprisingly, we still use this today. I mean, we have trained individuals, we have trained technicians, we have trained air traffic controllers and pilots. But for some reason, we don't trust that they can do the better job. We put all these restrictions around them to ensure that they follow the rules. But if you go deeper and understand how the job is done, you'll see something different. So the idea is tell them what to do, and then they will do it. Sure. But is that the case? Count success by the absence of negatives. Okay? So we count errors. We put a number out there. We're chasing a number. So what are the effects? We have what you call a growing safety bureaucracy. So what happens when there's an incident or an accident? I mean, recently we've had with the train accident around Tembisa or so. The first thing that you saw is human error caused the accident. And I can tell you today, most probably that's where they stopped doing the investigation, because they found the culprit. We found the problem. It's a human being. So what are we going to do? We're just going to remove that individual. But if you go back and look deeper into the system, you'll uncover a whole lot of things. Okay? So normally what happens is then they're going to put most probably other processes, more procedures, more rules, and then we say we are safe. What we're essentially doing is just stifling human cognition. So in fact, there's no measurable improvement in safety. That's what we're doing. We're just throwing more rules into the system. That's it. That's what we're doing. We're not improving safety. And most probably we're still going to have another accident. Maybe we're measuring the wrong risk, because our focus is on the people on the front line. We discard the decisions that are made higher up in the organizations. We come up with rules sitting in account offices and say to the operational people, make it work. It becomes a numbers game. It's very interesting. I've got so many examples, but I won't mention there. It becomes a number. For example, we have a risk that we know that if it's an event, for example, or an incident, but because we have a number, people have to reduce those numbers. Things are swept under the carpet. Or how we see that incident gets moved, it's shifted. We no longer know what is runway incursion any longer. There's so many definitions of that, because we're running away from the number. Operational people become disengaged. Have you seen people working in an organization that are not engaged in the organization but engaged in what they're doing? Safety management. I see I have a few minutes left. I need to expedite. So in terms of safety management, we use what you call sticks and carrots. We're dangling the sticks. If there's no incident, if there's no accident, you're getting something in your pocket. So the sticks is compliance and demands, surveillance, sanctions. Whoever's going to commit an error is going to get a hiding. Okay? And we'll reward those who do not commit an error. There's a guy called Dan Pink. He says there's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. In fact, we talk about performance management. Because of time, I won't go into details with these things. Okay? If you want to read more, there's a book published last year, Risky Rewards, How Company Bonuses Affect Safety. Very interesting. Very interesting. Safety differently. How do we need to look at safety? We need to see people as a solution, as a resource that we can use to ensure safety. In fact, How we see safety, we think safety is a commodity. People want to feel and touch safety. You're not going to do that. You're not going to find safety anywhere. Safety is what we do in the operational level. We create safety. The people at the front line create safety. Ask them what they need. It's as simple as that. Huh? Sometimes we design stuff and dump them in the operational environment and say, make it work. They will make it work. Guess what? Some of the rules that you put in place are going to be broken. Now we need to count positive capacities of what people do. We need to move, well, I don't want to use the word move away from safety management. We need to somehow think about crossing floors and talk about safety leadership somehow. Okay. Just quickly, safety one is what we currently look at. The definition of safety, we look at the freedom from unacceptable risk. In terms of resilience engineering, we talk about ability to succeed under varying conditions. We know for a fact that there's going to be mishaps. What is it that you do so that when those mishaps happen, the impact is not that great? It's going to happen. Incident is going to happen. Accident is going to happen. What are the things that you put in place when it happens that you are ready? How we understand safety, we see systems as tractable and performance conditions can be completely specified. On the other hand, resilience engineering, we say systems are intractable and performance conditions are always underspecified. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But we behave in such a manner as if we know what's going to happen tomorrow for some reason. How do you explain accidents? Incidents are caused by failures and malfunctions on the other hand. And things basically happen in the same way regardless of the outcome. People do not come to work to cause harm. I'm here to find somebody who comes to work to deliberately cause harm. How do you view human factor? We see them as liability, but in resilience we see them as a resource because we have highly trained individuals. Why don't we believe in their abilities? Safety management in principle is very reactive. It responds when something happens. That's how safety management is. All right? On the other hand, resilience engineering, we need to be proactive and anticipate events. I need to expedite. So what is resilience? Is the intrinsic ability of a system to adjust its functioning prior to or during or following changes and disturbances so that it can sustain required operations even after major mishaps. Okay. How will you identify organizations that are resilient? They do not take past results as guarantee for future success. Because we're looking at number, at one point when there's 1.99, we celebrate, yay, we are now safe. And we forget about everything else until something happens like, what happened here? They keep the discussion about risk alive even when nothing has happened. We need to keep on talking about things that may happen in the system. They bring in different and fresh perspective around safety. They have the functional resource to put the foot down around safety. Very interesting here. When there's changes in organizations, the first function that gets affected is the safety department because you don't see the value. All right, now we need to move from the negative to the positive. Okay, I wanted to do this quickly. So the 4 cornerstones of resilience. Okay, this is what we should be looking at when we're talking about safety. We need to respond to the things that comes out of the operational environment. When a controller, a pilot comes up and say, boss or whoever, this thing does not work in our environment, we need to respond appropriately. We need to anticipate things that may go wrong and things that may go right. We need to learn from things that happens, and then we need to monitor. The bottom line is that Okay? It is possible to summarize the argument by the following statements. When something goes wrong, then there is no safety, isn't it? Safety is missing or is not there. When nothing goes wrong, when things just work as they should, then there is safety. Therefore, the scientific study of safety should focus nothing goes wrong where there is safety rather than on situation where something goes wrong, where there's no safety. All right? Isaac Einstein said everybody perseveres in his state of being at rest, of moving, unless something compelling happens. So the purpose of this presentation is just to try and nudge us to move in a different direction. Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't know.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next set of presentations will be starting at 11:45, which is in 5 minutes. The allocation is as follows. Area 1, lasers and their threat to aviation safety, M. Taylor. Area 2, mental health in aviation, P. Van Rooyen. Area 3, runway incursions, DJ The Nation, ATNS. Area 4, the commercialization journey of multicam, Etienne Cox. I'll repeat that. Area 1, lasers and their threat to aviation safety, M. Taylor. Area 2, mental health in aviation, P. Van Rooyen. Area 3, runway incursions, DJ The Nation, ATNS. Area 4, the commercialization journey of multicam, Etienne Cox.
day to you. It's so nice to be here this morning, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Nicholas Taylor. I'm an air traffic controller at Johannesburg International, and I'll be giving you a presentation this morning about lasers and aviation. So lasers are smaller than a bird, as fast as light, and as bright as the sun. So the word laser is actually an acronym, which is also its definition. So the word laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. So a laser is not just an extra powerful flashlight. A laser is actually a highly focused, high energy output light dedicated in one direction. You can compare the difference between a laser and a normal light like we have in the ceiling here to comparing a water sprinkler and a high pressure hose. So the ordinary lights we have in the ceiling are a lot like a water sprinkler. There's lots of light or water going everywhere, but the impact is not so drastic or damaging to anything around it. Whereas a laser, like a high pressure hose, the light or the water is dedicated in one direction, going at a very high speed, and it can cause dangers to anything it might come across. If you've ever been sprayed at with a high pressure hose, it's quite sore. Lasers have been around a lot longer than we might think. They were originally developed in the early 1960s and were first described as a solution looking for a problem. It wasn't long until lasers found their way into our lives and made our lives better and better and easier every day for us. CD and DVD players use lasers to read their discs. The barcode scanner in your local grocery store uses a laser to read the barcode tag and tell you how much to pay for your bread and milk. Medical professionals then took lasers and used them in the medical world to improve our eyesight. All of these wonderful benefits from lasers. But now I'll ask you the question, is there a place for lasers in aviation? Before we continue, let us first define again what aviation is. Now most of us here, I take it, are aviation professionals, but the definition of aviation is actually quite simple. Aviation is in fact just the flying and operating of aircraft. But we all know that, however, that simple definition is actually not so simple in reality. There are countless complexities to running an airport and an airline, many moving parts to an aircraft as well as the organizations that run and handle them, and not to forget the millions of passengers worldwide every day who rely on people like you and me to keep our industry as safe as possible all day, every day. So again, is there a place for lasers in aviation? Well, the answer is yes. We have all actually had lasers working in aviation for a very long time. When you get to the airport and you have a barcode, a tag attached to your bag by airline staff, a laser is used to track your bag through the systems that it gets to the right aircraft for your flight. Security staff also use lasers to scan your tickets and your passports to validate their authenticity. Such great benefits to lasers in aviation, but at this point I'd like to depart from the benefits and focus on the one single thing that we do not want lasers for in aviation. There is a very dark and unwelcome side of lasers that we are experiencing in aviation today. Shining a laser in somebody's eyes, I won't do it to any of you, don't worry, is incredibly dangerous, and it can lead to permanent eye damage or even blindness. Over the past few years, there has been a dramatic and concerning rise in the amount of laser interference to aircraft and air traffic control towers around the world. What is happening is people are shining lasers in the eyes of pilots and air traffic controllers, causing blindness and loss of night vision when the guys are flying at night. So how does this fit together? Well, think about it like this. When you're driving your car at night and somebody shines a bright light in your eyes, you find it difficult to see. Your natural reaction, I hope, is not to put your lights on bright and to shine it back at them and hoot at them and wave at them as they drive past. Your natural reaction actually is to turn your head away, which means you're being distracted from the task, and then also to still try and see what's in front of you, which is disruption of the task. The same thing is happening to our pilots and our air traffic controllers. There are a few phases which affect air traffic controllers and pilots when lasers are being shone at them. The first phase, known as distraction and startle. Sorry, the laser actually doesn't work on the TV, so please just follow on the diagram. When the effects of a laser beam first are seen in the cockpit by pilots, they are distracted from their current task and also startled, and they might lead to think, is there a greater danger behind the light? As the light from the laser persists, the effects of glare and disruption continue in the cockpit. So now what you have happening is pilots are taking their hands off of controls to block the light, whilst also turning their heads away from what's in front of them. This is a very unsafe scenario, as now you have pilots turning their hands and their faces away from controls moments before landing an aircraft filled with hundreds of passengers. Should the light from the laser persist even further, the effects of flash blindness and after image can take an effect in the eyes of the pilots and even air traffic controllers if they are affected. This means that for a few moments, neither a pilot or an air traffic controller will be able to see what is directly in front of them. Nobody wants that, especially when a pilot is landing an aircraft or taking off, or an air traffic controller is working a busy control tower at night. So you might lead yourself to asking now, why do people do such things? If only you knew the reasons why people shine lasers on aircraft. Could it be a case of intended and unintended misuse of lasers? Nowadays, performers and entertainers are using lasers and light shows at night to draw greater crowds into their shows. The lasers and the lights increase the atmosphere in the stadium or wherever they are performing, and it brings people in. There is a possibility, however, that light and lasers can escape from these shows and veer across the paths of aircraft or into the line of sight of air traffic control towers. This would be classed as an unintended misuse of lasers. Stargazing. If you've taken a laser outside at night, you'll notice that it will shine a perfectly straight line into the night sky. People who are avid stargazers will use lasers to point out stars of interest to people around them. Now, for those of us who don't know what it's like to work in air traffic control, or maybe even in your own environment at night, you've often looked into the sky and seen a bright light. You think that's a really bright star. In fact, it's an aircraft moving towards you. You could mistake that for a star, and it has been done before. Again, that is unintended misuse of a laser. The cool new toy, or as I like to call the naughty boy syndrome. Now, some of us here have been privileged to buy brand new cars in our lives, and when you do, you want to show it off to all the people around you. You take the car, you see how fast you can drive, that's great. Now, for just a couple of $100, you can buy the latest, greatest, brightest laser on the market, and beyond any shadow of a doubt, you want to show it off to your friends. So your friends might come around for a bra in the evening, you shine it on their shirt, you shine it on your lasers, on your neighbor's wall. Eventually somebody's going to say, look, can that laser reach an aircraft in the sky? And what happens, they point at an aircraft, yes it can, great stuff. It's not great stuff because now you've just blinded a pilot. That would be intentional misuse of a laser. Now, malicious use. I thoroughly believe that there are a few grumpy and disgruntled members of society who are tired of having aircraft flying over their houses day in and day out. So they think that as you take a newspaper to a fly and squash it on the table, shining a laser at an aircraft will do the same thing. Unfortunately for them, neither the airport or the aircraft are going to move anywhere. So what can we do? Can we improve legislation to govern who can buy, sell, or use lasers for whatever reason? Should we impose restrictions on licensed operators? In other words, people who use lasers for commercial purposes, should we govern when, how, the strength of the laser, the angle of the laser that they'll be using it for? Automatic or manual aircraft spotters. When lasers are being used in light shows in the vicinity of an airport, we can use manual aircraft spotters, i.e. just a person, who can track whether there are aircraft in the vicinity and then turn the lasers away from that should there be a risk. We can also install automatic detection, which will automatically turn a laser away should it detect the presence of an aircraft. Laser-free and or laser-controlled airspace. Should we create airspace around airports that is completely laser-free? Lasers are banned in that airspace completely. If somebody should use a laser in that airspace for commercial purposes, then again, the direction, strength, and angle of the lasers being used must be governed so that safety is maintained and the lasers do not go near aircraft. Fines or jail time for offenders. Now, the South African Civil Aviation Authority already has retribution in place for court offenders, and there have been arrests made both in South Africa and around the world in the recent years. Public awareness campaigns. So like this presentation, or as our guys from the CA have put out a banner or a poster for the public, radio broadcasts, internet adverts, to raise public awareness about the risk of lasers to aviation. All of these can be used to mitigate the risk of lasers. Tips for pilots and air traffic controllers: never try and look at where the laser beam is coming from. You're only going to make it worse for yourself. Rather, look away as much as possible and report it to air traffic control or other flight crew who may be affected. If possible, engage autopilot to help fly the aircraft. Use crew resource management or team resource management to help you in your current situation. If you are suffering from the effects of a laser, get somebody to help you. Turning up the background lighting on the flight deck or in the control tower will help to dampen the effect of the laser. Now, aviation is an industry you all love, and there are many risks and hazards which are beyond our control, such as the weather. We can never control the weather. But a laser is a man-made invention. If you create something, you have the power and the influence to control its use. We invented lasers, and therefore we have the power and the influence to control their use. Can we work together to make this better? Is there a way forward, you ask? And the answer is always yes. In aviation, the answer always must be yes to safety. We can never afford to rest on our laurels and say that safety has been achieved, because then we're going to end up in a bad place. Let us work together as industry and organizations to make the sky safer for our pilots and our air traffic controllers, and to protect the industry that we love all, which is the aviation industry. Thank you very much. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Something that we must also make the people aware of. You see, you get blue lasers now as well.
Yes, and we've
I
actually...
don't know what the blue laser. I know the green laser are the worst normally because you can see where the beam is. The red laser is really hit and miss if you're going to hit an aeroplane at night. But the green laser is so easy now. The blue laser, I haven't actually. I've got one at home. I haven't.
Is it this one? Is that the disc? Davy Bear?
Yeah, just on to us. All that's on that disc is. I haven't actually tested that blue laser outside to see if it also shows you like the green laser does.
I know what they have done. When I was doing some research for this, can I just pull it up?
Yeah.
The,
Oh, for us.
I mean, these old red lasers are what first came out.
Yeah,
they're strong, but they're not that strong. They'll still do damage to something.
The green lasers are bad news.
Yeah, so as they've made them better and better, I don't know why, I can't quite figure, because people just use it for these, or stargazing, but so why make it bigger and brighter?
Chinese.
Yeah, there we go.
And then you put a lens on the front and make funny patterns. It's nice for the kids to play with. The kids shine it in each other's eyes. It's nice making funny blocks on the wall. And all sorts of things. I suppose the blue might have been for the same thing.
So
Just the uniqueness.
I mean, I must be honest, when I first heard about lasers being thrown at aircraft, I never knew different colours existed.
Yeah, the biggest issue has been since green lasers.
Yeah, because they are
Because you can actually see where it is.
Yes.
The red laser to try and point at an aircraft is going to be, you're going to guess. And it's going to be bad luck if you get it into the cockpit. The green one, you can put it onto the aeroplane and follow it. So, because the thing really shines 50. Well, I don't know how far it shines.
And most of our reports are all green lasers.
Yeah, it's will be green lasers. So as you can actually see the aircraft and follow it. As I said, I don't know about the blue one yet. Let's actually take it out. Yeah, no, you get blue now.
slight change of program. Allocation is as follows. Area 1, air traffic resource tool, the Weave Messenger. Area 2, operation technology, the value of measuring technical support contributions to aviation safety. Mera Ujobrana of ATNS. Area 3 is RPAS, operations and safety, Marius Cornier, visual air. Area 4 is asterisk surveillance monitoring by Professor Maharaj and Esmarie Stein. I'll repeat that. Area 1, air traffic resource tool, the Weave Messenger. Area 2, operation technology, the value of measuring technical support contributions to aviation safety. Kumile Ugushobwana,
Like me.
ATNS. Area 3, RPAS operations and safety, Marius Cornier, visual air. Area 4, asterisk surveillance monitoring, Professor Maharaj and Esmarie Stein.
Okay, we're going to start the presentation on the ATS resource tool. Hi, my name is Louise. I'm an ATCO 3 controller at the Durban International or King Shark International Airport. I'm here with my team, and we are representing ATNS today to give you an explanation or introduction to the ATS resource tool. Just quickly, we're going to be explaining the background of the project that we are running, also a little bit of a demonstration of how the tool actually works, and then we'll also give you all the benefits that goes with the ATS resource tool. Okay. Little bit of a background, how this project started. ATNS was committed to evolve their paper-based systems into electronic systems, and one of the first projects that we started was to evolve our paper-based rostering system into an electronic resource scheduling tool that will be able to be managed and filed electronically online, also be accessed either in-house or remotely. And this will also be linked to all the biometrics tools or biometric systems, and then information will be gathered on the biometrics and then imported into the tool. Now, the project started about 2 years ago. We managed to get 7 key users and 3 subject matter experts, and we were basically charged with the task of creating test cases and then testing the modules as it was received from the supplier, because we bought this project from an international company. Also, what we had to do is we had to create training material and then go around to all the different stations and train the employees on how to use this resource tool. We were also we were instrumental in the implementation of the resource tool in the different stations, and then some of us were also asked to use or give input on the biometrics installation. Basically, 2 years later, what we have is an electronic scheduling tool that can be managed on a daily basis electronically. It is available electronically for employees to sign in at work to have a look and see what your schedule is like, but they can also access the tool remotely. Like I said, it's linked to a biometric system, and the data from the biometrics are imported into the tool, and that information is used to create reports. Now, the tool will also be linked to certain departments in ATNS, which is payroll and human capital, and the reports that are generated will be exported to payroll, which takes away another paper-based system, and also employee information will be imported from human capital into the resource tool where it can be maintained. Into the tool, we've got some built parameters. Like ATNS, like any other company, has to abide by labor rules that are either predetermined by the CIA or negotiated by with the unions, and we have to abide by those rules and regulations. Now, these rules and regulations are all built into the resource tool, which means when the planner or the rostering person, like we like to call it, when they create a schedule, they will always create a schedule that is based on the rules. We can never create a schedule that is illegal. You also have a function in this tool to create global parameters. These are station-specific parameters, which will basically be like your shift length or time in between shifts and those kind of things. You can set these parameters, and when the planner sits down to create a new schedule on this electronic tool, the tool will adhere to these labor rules. So again, we can never create a plan that is not legal. Now, creating a schedule, even if it's paper-based or electronically, it's a process. It starts with the requirement, it ends with the end result, which is the final plan. And like you can see, there's different steps that you have to follow in the tool. Now, in the tool, some of the steps you will only do once when you start using the tool. Other steps, obviously, you will have to do every time you create a new schedule. So how do we create a schedule in this tool? First step, we all have shifts at our respective units. These are the shifts that you created to cover your demand or put people in position in front of radar screens or in the tower. So your first step as a planner will be to create a shift pattern. These patterns you will only do once. Once you start creating or using the tool, you will create the pattern once, and you'll use the same pattern over and over. So every time you create a new schedule, you will just import the pattern that you've already created, until such time that you actually maybe have to change your shifts, then you'll just alter your pattern. Now, there's some units in South Africa or in ATNS that has a forward rotation predictive rostering, and all that means it's a cycle. So it might be a 9-day cycle that consists of 2 mornings, 2 afternoons, 2 night shifts, and 3 days off. And this cycle repeats itself over and over during the year. The nice thing about this tool, it has the capacity to create a schedule if that is what you want to use. So if you want to use a cyclic plan, you are more than welcome to do that. But right now, currently, there's only some stations that are it. It is not something that has been implemented across ATNS. But the tool can do it, which is great. Now, once you've created your shift pattern, your next step will obviously be to create a schedule. So what will happen is the planner will sit down on the electronic system. He will have a blank schedule with all the employees available to him in his schedule. He will then import the shift pattern that consists of all the shifts that he needs to apply, and he will manually assign the shifts to the staff available. Now, that's the manual process. The nice thing about this tool, it's got a button. It's called the optimizer function. And within minutes, this tool can create a full schedule based on your labor rules, and the system itself will assign all the available shifts to all the available staff complying to the rules. So you can have a completely automated schedule generation with, and then the planner can just monitor to make sure that it is fair and consistent. Once the schedule has been completed and you publish it, the employees are able to log into the resource tool, into the employee portal, and this is where they'll be able to see the schedule. This is the only view that the employees sort of be interacting. All the interaction is on this view. This is also where they will be inputting their preferences, where they will be doing their shift exchanges or day off exchanges, and eventually also be putting into their leave request that will be exported to human capital. Now, there's two different plannings that the manager can do in this resource tool. The first one being the annual planning, which is basically your leave planning. So the manager will log into the tool and do a year plan for all leave requests. Once the annual plan is published, this annual plan will be visual in the rostering tool as well. So as soon as the planner sits down to create a new schedule, all the leave that's been planned for that duration will automatically appear in the schedule, and he'll be able to assign shifts around the planned leave. The same for the training plan. It's another plan the manager can do. This is training plans or short-term plans or maybe even long-term plans for specifically for training. So if you have somebody that's going to the college or going to study for a week or 2 weeks, you can assign a student and instructor to that plan. You publish the plan, and then automatically when the planner sits down to create a new schedule, that training plan will be visible in the resource tool, and your planner can assign shifts around it. Daily activities. So what this means is now that you've got your schedule, you've got your annual plan, your training plan, everything's in the schedule is published and it's visible, the manager will now be responsible to maintain that schedule on a daily basis. And there are unforeseen things that happen, like sick days or people booking off or operational requirements, things that need to change. This will now be the manager's responsibility to log into the resource tool, and you can manage this on a daily basis, or basically update it. The employee information on this resource tool is quite useful. Like I said, we are linked to human capital, so all the information on the employee that is based at human capital will be imported from human capital and will be saved on the resource tool. This is also including very important information like your medical expiry dates. It'll be your proficiency dates, your annual standards check dates, and all those kind of things. It'll all be in the resource tool. It'll either be imported from CRS, but it can also be maintained by the planner and the manager itself. Also, nice thing in this tool that it actually gives you a visual reminder on the tool to say that your medical is due, or your annual check is due, or your proficiency is due. So that's a useful function in the tool. So when the planner sits down to create a schedule, he will actually get a visual reminder to say that certain employees are due to do annual checks or medicals. Biometrics, I mentioned that ATNS is busy in the process of installing biometric scanners in all the units and all the towers within ATNS. Once this is up and running, the biometrics will be linked to the resource tool, and all the data that is captured from the biometric scanners will go into the resource tool, and this information will be used to create reports. Now currently we have a paper-based system for overtime claims, OJTI claims, Sunday and public holiday claims. This will now be generated in the resource tool, and at the end of the cycle be exported to places like payroll, eliminating another paper-based system. Like I said, reports generated, these are things like the overtime and also your OJT claim and Sundays, automatically generated and exported. Now this looks a bit daunting, but this is basically when you signed on and off on the biometrics, this is what it looks like. The managers will be responsible to maintain this and then sign it off. Now, a year ago we started with phase 2 of the project, and we decided to eliminate some other paper-based systems that we have in ATNS and then incorporate it into the resource tool. The first one of them being memos and instructions. At the moment, if you go into our center, all our memos and instructions are paper-based in a file that you have to go open up and read. What they've now decided is that your memos and instructions will be an electronic version on the resource tool. So you'll be able to log into the tool, you'll be able to read your memos and instructions, acknowledge that you've read it, it'll be date and time stamped, and it can be managed by the manager, or it can be accessed by the manager. The nice thing about the memos and instructions, it can also be accessed remotely from home. So if you're 2 days before leave and you want to know what the memos and instructions are, you can log in, you can actually have a look at it. Pre-flight information bulletin at the moment is also a paper-based system that we decided to incorporate into the resource tool. Now this can only be accessed at work, and the idea about this is that employees will be required to log into the tool and acknowledge that they've read the PIBs before they take over on position. Now PIBs normally consist of relevant station-specific information, which means you'll have read all that information before you take over in position, which ultimately could only help with the efficiency and the safety operations on position. Training logs is one of the last paper-based systems we've decided to incorporate into the tool. Right now, if you're a student, you will be walking around with a paper copy of a training log, and as you go through the training, your instructor has to sign on in your training log for that day's session. We've decided to incorporate that in as well, so it'll be the manager's responsibility to create a digital or electronic training log for each student for each discipline. Once your training is complete, that training log will be closed and it can be archived electronically for future use. Now how this will basically work is if you have a day's worth of training, your instructor will be responsible at the end of the day to log into the tool and create a training log page within the training log. And that training log page consists of all the objectives that you would have done, and you also be able to enter comments. The student will be responsible to log into the tool, acknowledge that he's seen it, and the manager can also access it and have a look to see what they did training-wise on that day. Again, once the training is complete, the log will be closed and it will be archived for future use. And that basically is the ATS resource tool. In conclusion, as I said in the beginning, ATNS is driving towards getting rid of all paper-based systems and going into a new age of electronic versions of all paper-based systems as we have now. So all our reports, registers that we're currently using for signing on and off will be replaced by the resource tool being able to capture information of biometrics and filing it into the resource tool and then submitting it electronically. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Yes.
I think it's environmentally friendly.
Yes.
And it eliminates the human factor error.
Absolutely. What she was saying is that that is also one of the biggest drives, obviously. It is environmentally friendly because we are getting rid of all the paper-based system. And what was the last thing you said? And human factors, everything else. Human factors. Absolutely. We all make mistakes, especially I can tell you for one, I've been doing overtime for 3 years and I do it on a paper-based system. This is effectively going to replace me as well because the tool will be doing it by itself. It does not mean it doesn't have to be monitored and checked, but the fact that you'll take that human factor out and it'll go straight and it'll alleviate that problem. Yes. Okay, the question is it an ATNS initiative or is it outsourced? What actually happened is that when we decided that we wanted to move into an electronic version of the roster, ATNS started a procurement process and we actually bought this product from overseas. So this is a 70% product from a supplier that added a 20% industrial solution because there are other service providers that use the same tool. And then the last 10% is ATNS specific. So what happened is the supplier came to ATNS, did interviews with the subject matter experts, we gave them our requirements, and they built the ATNS requirements on top of the 70% standard product and the 20% industrial solution already. So yes, it's a bought product, but it's very much ATNS tweaked. The reports and the biometrics and those kind of things, if I'm correct, it's all new. We added that in. Training logs, it was designed for us. So we've taken a product and we made it better. Okay, the supplier is called Quintic. They are a company in Netherlands. So we've been using or working quite closely with their business consultants. They've been flying out quite a lot over the last 2 years, working with us on position, helping us with test cases, helping us developing and giving us the models. And they've also been quite helpful when we had to approach them for questions and technical advice. They've been supporting us. So we bought the product from them. It's called Quintic. Apparently, to her. Any other questions? Speak to her. She's got business cards. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, that will be end of our question.
Mic check, 1 2. 1 2. Nice and clear, huh? Cool, fantastic. Mic check, 1 2. 1 2. Mic check, 1 2. 1 2. Mic check, 1 2. 1 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, just one more quick announcement, just to encourage you to attend the presentation sessions in the exhibition hall. Once again, a repeat of the program. Area 1, from counting errors to creating potential for resilience and managing safety, Martina Shabalala. Area 2, space solutions for aviation, Dr. Leanne McKinnell. Area 3, emotional intelligence and aviation, Kane Makanya. Area 4, OEM advanced manufacturing, light
Do you use the mic?
I did this morning. Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. Please, to keep the sound. Yeah, I will go down.
Right. Sound like it's on. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I think we're going to start now. It sounds like that's our cue. Okay. My name is Leanne McKinnell. I'm from the South Africa. Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay, good afternoon. Okay, that's much better. Thank you. Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leanne McKinnell. I'm from the South African National Space Agency. SONSA has been working quite a lot with ATNS in order to look at how we can provide some solutions to aviation based on space. So how can we use space to better help you guys in aviation? I'm going to, my presentation will cover three main areas. So the first thing that I want to point out is that SONSA's vision is to be an international hub for space solutions for the world of the future, and the key there is space solutions. So we know that people mostly say when you work for the space agency, are you going to send a man to the moon, are you going to put up satellites? But really we're also about using space, better utilization of space for solutions. And the three solutions I'm going to talk about today is a project we have on space weather, together with ATNS, looking at the space weather impact on aviation and how can we mitigate against that. And then we're going to look at a navigation solution that we're also working on called SBAS, the Satellite-Based Augmentation System. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about using space know-how for magnetic technology solutions, and things that you might not know about is happening that utilizes space know-how and our space facilities. Right, so the first is space weather, impact on aviation. Last year's AVI AFRIQUE, I did a presentation entirely on space weather, which you might have seen. I'm just going to have a few slides to show you where we are with that project. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, space weather refers to the distance between the sun and the earth and the weather in space, basically. But that space weather has been there for a long time, but what's new is the impact that space weather has on our technology, and that's new because our dependence and reliance on technology has increased over the years. Space weather is a consequence of the behavior of the sun, the nature of the Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere, and our location in the solar system, which basically means that space weather is a natural phenomena. It's driven by the sun. We can't turn off the sun or turn on the sun or make the sun behave in a certain way. But what we can do is we can understand the environment, and we can understand how the sun behaves and how that in turn impacts Earth and how it in turn impacts our technology. And that's the solutions we can provide. It's not about stopping it from happening, it's about knowing enough in order to mitigate what happens. So the impact on aviation, and that's all I'm going to concentrate on today, is in 3 areas: high frequency communication and actually satellite communication as well. But HF communication is one of the primary backup responses for communication in passenger aircraft, so it's very important. Airline navigation, so particularly on the landing and the takeoff. And then radiation doses. How does space weather affect the radiation exposure that an aircraft has? I'm going to talk about those 3 things. The little statistics I have in the bar next to it is from the October 2003, which was known as the solar superstorm. It's actually called the Halloween storm. It's one of those textbook examples we give where they actually have some statistics, and they showed the inaccuracies that occurred in the wide area augmentation system in the US based on space weather, and they were able to make directly that link. So that was when it was sort of first started looking at space weather's impacts on aviation and how we could mitigate for it. This is like my attempt in one picture, in one slide, to tell you where the areas are that impact aviation. So your solar event, I'm sorry this doesn't work very well on the screen, but your solar event where the space weather starts could be in the form of a solar flare, it could be in the form of a coronal mass ejection, or solar wind, or high solar wind, or galactic cosmic rays, any of those things. And that's what's at the top, the primary driver of the solar event that you're looking at, the space weather event. On the left-hand side in purple, we have the aviation-related systems that could be affected, and they range from passengers and crew, so biological effects, increased exposure to radiation, for example, all the way through avionics, the electronic systems, to communications, HF communications, also communications via satellite, also your navigation systems that are dependent on satellites, low frequency communications, ATC facilities, etc. And you can see the crosses mark which solar events lead to which disruptions. And in some cases, like for example, satellites are always affected by what's happening in space weather. And so that's one of the areas we have to consider, as well as GPS and the WAS system as well. And HF communication is one of the primary interests in South Africa, because not only for aviation, but for other sectors who are using it as their primary mode of communication still. So one of the requirements is we've been also working with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Authority, who are have introduced a recommendation that space weather should be a part of any aircraft's flight plan in the future. They've recommended that this be implemented from 2017, and we're expecting news from them, but we've been working with them because one of the things about space weather being in aviation is that you have to translate it into a language that the pilots and the operators can understand. So they are not necessarily interested in what the size of a solar flare or the size of the coronal mass ejection or even the speed of the solar wind. What they want to know is, can I go or not? And if I go, what are the risks? And so that's the kind of language we're working with ICAO to put space weather in. So there will be a standard for space weather information that will come from ICAO, and SONSA will do our best to provide the information in that format. We also need to create awareness of space weather, which is part of what we're doing around with ATNS within the national aviation sector, and we've been in many forums over this past year to pass on that message and to educate. And then one of the things we want to identify aviation partners in South Africa who are prepared to work with us in terms of collecting data, statistics and information so that we can move more closely to getting the right information to the right people at the right time to enable the right decision making. So that's part of the project that we're working on at the moment with ATNS. Typical products and services for aviation would include daily space weather bulletins in the ICAO format, warnings and alerts on adverse space weather, radiation dose calculations for given routes, particularly the closer you fly to the poles, the more susceptible you're going to be. And also what we found is that long-haul flights, people who frequently fly long-haul flights might be more susceptible. Then the last two are to do with HF communication, so predicting what are the conditions, what frequencies would be better useful for voice, etc. So SONSA, and finally on this subject, SONSA is part of the international working group. We've been nominated by South Africa to represent South Africa on the ICAO working group to determine a set format for space weather information that can be usable in all areas of aviation. So you don't want a situation where a pilot takes off from Johannesburg with a set of information in one format. When he takes off from Hong Kong, he's got a different format. So we have to all be speaking the same language. So we're working with them to do that. And then also we need to assess what would be useful to the South African sector, because space weather is a global science, but it has regional impact. So what would be useful for us, depending on the routes we fly, the conditions we meet, etc., that is what we need to determine. And working with aviation partners will do that. So that's on space weather. The next section is just a few slides on SBAS, which is a project that we're running. At the moment, SBAS stands for Satellite-Based Augmentation System. It's about enhancing aviation safety. The RSA SBAS project is the South African Satellite-Based Augmentation Service. It's a project initiated by SONSA together with partners in the UK, Avante, and the UK Space Agency. Currently, it is funded by the UK Space Agency to look at the feasibility of bringing SBAS to the Southern African region. These are just some of the partners that we're working with together on this project. There's a lot of interest in it, but there's also a lot of unknown questions around the feasibility that we're trying to answer. What is SBAS? SBAS stands for, as I said, Satellite-Based Augmentation Service. Its aim is to improve GPS. So it uses GPS, but it gives you a better, that's why it says augmentation system, a better service than GPS. Its aim is to provide corrections to improve accuracy to around 1 meter horizontal and 1.5 meter vertical, and also to provide better integrity information. SBAS systems broadcast these data from geostationary satellites using a GPS-like signal. So the SBAS data can be used by many existing low-cost GPS receivers without the expense of an additional data link. So it's turning out to be a system that can be used, but using existing infrastructure as well. This is just the testbed infrastructure diagram. It looks very complicated, but basically the end-to-end SBAS process duration takes around 6 seconds, uses satellites and existing ground-based GPS receivers to facilitate the information. It is not only usable for the aviation sector, it's also usable for the agricultural sector and the maritime sector, and the tests that we've done in South Africa to date have been in the agricultural sector for precision farming. And so some of the same principles apply, but we are working with the farming industry to test drive it there. Just from a commercial aviation aspect, these SBAS Africa benefits have been driven mainly by the agricultural and land mobile logistics. We have typically ignored commercial aviation, including Category 1 precision approach. We have considered a general business aviation precision approach capability with a 400-foot decision height. What we basically mean is that we are considering the business case where SBAS is useful for small rural airports, and not gone for the commercial angle because the benefits are much smaller there. South Africa is currently part of a cost of benefit realization for developing the SBAS approach procedures for aviation, and we're aiming at those small airports. These are just one result slide, looking at GPS only and GPS plus SBAS. The two main concerns, of course, is integrity and accuracy. So with SBAS, you can get guaranteed integrity, and your errors with SBAS are much smaller than using GPS on its own. So basically, it's an augmentation system utilizing satellites for navigation. My third section is on using magnetic technology, products and services for aviation. And this is in several areas. Firstly, geomagnetic field modeling. So the Earth's magnetic field is changing all the time. What we do at SONSA is we measure the Earth's magnetic field in various points across the continent, and we are looking at magnetic inclination and declination points, which are then used for mapping. And so these maps, at the moment, for example, ATNS are using this data to do land surveys and runway surveys at the different airports to make sure that the pointing that they have for your runways is absolutely accurate and is not changing with the magnetic field. Right, then we do calibration and maintenance of landing compasses, magnetic survey of compass swing areas. So our facility in Omanis is one of the only facilities in the Southern African region where you can have your landing compass, reference compass, calibrated. So we do a lot of work for the South African Air Force and for private aviation and commercial aviation in South Africa in this regard. Also, presentation of training courses related to the execution of aircraft compass swings, and then the execution of magnetic tests on newly developed avionics equipment. So, for example, you have a piece of avionics equipment that you want to install, but in order for you to be able to use it, particularly when safety of life is at a critical stage, you need to have it accredited to an international testing standard. And for that you need a magnetically clean facility, which we can offer. This is just an example of what a magnetic survey of a compass swing area is about. The top picture shows you an RX helicopter that was being calibrated. So typically you have to have a magnetic clean environment. So what we do is we go out to the Air Force Base or the airport and we survey an area to make sure it's magnetically clean, and then that area is accredited for compass swings. And you do a compass swing in order to calibrate your onboard compasses. And so that's the example of what's been happening there. And the reference compass that is on the tripod there is something similar to that. It's a handheld landing or reference compass that's been calibrated in a magnetic clean environment and then is brought into the compass swing area to calibrate the onboard compasses. So we do quite a lot of work in that area as well. Sorry, I went backwards. Okay, then we have a large Helmholtz coil system, which is used to cancel out the Earth's magnetic field. And for that, we can do magnetic characterization. So we characterize magnetometers. We also characterize magnetic signature of dynamic platforms. So, for example, a satellite or an unmanned aircraft would be completely in metal, and you would want to put on a magnetic sensor for navigation. So then your magnetic sensor would need to be calibrated to take into consideration the magnetic signature of the whole device. And so we use the Helmholtz coil system for that. I keep going backwards. This is just some examples of where we have compensated for platform magnetism. So we do this for satellite work as well, but we also do quite a bit for unmanned aircraft and other dynamic systems. And we can place the system inside our Helmholtz coil system and rotate the Earth's magnetic field around it, thereby getting a certain magnetism. And this is all about making sure that the accuracy of your navigation systems on board the aircraft or the unmanned plane or whatever it is sure. Okay, then finally, these are just some of the unique systems that we have. So magnetically clean environment, expertise and quality assured data. Essentially what we're doing at SANSA is we're taking our space know-how and our space facilities to provide non-space applications to the aerospace and aviation sector. And so we use this kind of equipment for that. So we have a large triaxial Helmholtz coil system. We have a magnetic shielding chamber for magnetic evaluation of sensors, and a non-magnetic temperature chamber as well. This squid device is used for measuring very, very small changes in the Earth's magnetic field. Then we have a number of research-grade magnetometers so that we can measure and evaluate magnetic environments. So typically what would happen is an airport would contact us and say, or the Air Force would contact us and say, we have an area in which we want to calibrate landing compasses, but we don't know if it's magnetically clean, and then we will do a magnetic survey of that area. This is just some pictures of the training facility that we have, and also the Helmholtz coil system with a magnetometer and a landing compass in the center of it. So that's some of the facilities that we're able to provide. And so I hope that this has given you an indication of some of the things that you can do if you know and understand the space environment, that will make the aviation environment a lot more secure and accurate and effective. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
My question was will be only regarding if you look at the weather forecast and simulation, are you applying the same kind of anticipation regarding the solar event and things like that, regarding the forecast, or is it just observation of what happened and just build statistic or prediction on that?
Okay, so in terms of forecast capability, our aim is to be able to predict and forecast the impact from space weather. We can't predict what's going to happen on the sun. We can learn from what's happened before to build models to tell us what the impact's likely to be and when it's likely to happen based on what's happening on the sun. So our aim is to be a forecast and prediction center. So typically one of the products we produce is that we look at high frequency predictions for certain paths. And then we'll say, this is what's happening on the sun, so your frequency table should look like this for communication. And those frequencies will last maybe 5 or 10 days, depending on what's happening on the sun and the intensity. So we're always aiming to be better and better at it, but nobody can predict what happens on the sun. So our aim is really to improve our models to such an extent that we can give you the longest possible lead time on predicting the impact that something on the sun is going to occur. So if we tell you, there's this kind of solar flare or this kind of CME happening, we can then tell you in 4 days' time, this is the impact you're going to see. Okay, but we can't give you, we're very reluctant to give you 3 months notice or 6 months notice, and some industries want that, but we will work with the operational guys to do it in an almost real-time basis. Yes, yes, and normally, depending on the impact, we can do that. Yeah, great. Any other questions? Okay, I see the lady with the finish now sign has gone by, so all right, thank you very much.
Where's the thing that you...
Area 2, mental health in aviation, Lee van Rooyen. Area 3, runway incursions, DJ De Nyssen. Area 4, OEM, advanced manufacturing, light helicopters, Brent Pinky, Pivot Technologies.
Okay, so seems it's only you. Well, we can run through it. So I don't know, what industry are you in? Air Force. Okay. So let's go through the presentation. It's air traffic control, and should be subject to medical examination both prior to employment in the profession and on a regular basis during the career. Well, we all know that happens. I mean, before we employ the air traffic controllers, then you go for a medical and you go for psychological evaluations like the pilots, and then you get employed, and then on a yearly basis, or depending on how old you are, 2 yearly basis, you go for a medical. So that happens. Okay. This is accordance to the annexes that it gets done. So it's the Class 3 medical that air traffic controllers do, and it's Part 67 of the Civil Aviation's and Technical Standards. Okay, so what brought the medical fitness to the foreground? It was the Germanwings accident, flight 9525, where the German co-pilot flew into the Alps, just off France, coming from Barcelona, flying over. Okay, so what happened with this thing is when the investigation is finished, the investigation, they actually detected that the guy's doctor, the co-pilot's doctor, told him that he needs to go see a psychiatrist because he had the idea that he's losing his eyesight, and it worried him so much that it started affecting his abilities. They did a lot of tests on him and found that there was nothing wrong with him, but it had a mental effect on him. So it affected him so bad that he started getting depression, and that's eventually that led to this accident. Yeah. So this is not the only accident. We have quite a few accidents that happened. In 2013, there was the guy that took off from Mozambique to Angola. He just on the other side of Botswana airspace in the little Kapurubistroog, he crashed there. Again, it was the co-pilot went to the toilet, locked himself into the cockpit, and just dialed in minus something and flew into the ground. Okay, so there was quite a few accidents like that happened, but never did we really start worrying about this. It's only after the Germanwings accident that ICAO and the doctors and everybody thought, whoa, we now sit with a problem. What brought this problem about? Locking the pilots into the cockpit. Because as good as that door keeps your hijackers out, as soon as one guy leaves the cockpit, it keeps him out as well. And there's no way that he can get into the cockpit, which now is another safety hazard that they never thought about, which is actually now worse than trying to keep the hijackers out, because our safety in the airports has been upgraded so much that the chances of a hijack is very little. The danger is now, our danger as passengers is the pilots, that if one goes to the toilet and the other one is in a mental health state and decides, I want to die today, so I'm just taking everybody with me. So that's the because of a knee-jerk reaction after September 11th, we now sit actually with a bigger safety problem than the hijacking problem. So that's the spotlight. After this September 11, we had now the spotlight on, we need to sort out, get the pilots safe in their own environment. Now the pilots are flying into the ground, so now someone say, oh shit, there's a problem. These people are there's a mental health problem. Okay. ALPA has a position on mental health, and I'll read their position. They say, ALPA considers that an extensive psychological or psychiatric evaluation as part of a routine pilot aeromedical assessment is neither productive nor cost effective, and therefore not warranted. Serious mental health illness are relatively rare amongst pilots, and the onset of such illness is impossible to predict. Mental health assessments will only create the illusion of safety enhancement. As there is no quick method of assessing a pilot's mental health during the aeromedical assessment, IFALPA recommends that an open and honest relationship be established between the pilot and the AME. Ultimately, the goal is to encourage pilots to consider their lifestyle and thereby improving the likelihood that they will remain in good mental health during their careers. So that's what we try and, even as IFALPA wants that, and GATSCA and IFATCA, which is now the bodies representing the air traffic controllers, are also advocating that stance, because we are of the opinion that we do not have such a big problem in the pilots and the air traffic controllers mental health wise. If we had serious mental health issues, it would have been picked up at the initial screening to become an air traffic controller of a pilot. Yes, you can become mentally sick. Normally it's because of depression or that kinds of things. And most of that problems can be rectified if you catch it early enough, and the person that is feeling the anxiety or the threats or the insecurities is willing to go to a doctor or professional healthcare to assist him. Okay, Annex 1 is the document that actually, when you go for your initial assessments as an air traffic controller of a pilot, that you need to satisfy to become an air traffic controller. So initially, before you even start your career, they do quite an excessive test on you to try and make sure that you are pretty stable. Well, probably most of us are not pretty stable, but they try at least. Okay, so a scientific understanding of a positive mental health, especially in a safety critical profession, and effective interventions are important for building thriving individuals and safeguarding aviation. So in mental health, we have basically three definitions that we look at. We have a mental health definition. It is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stress of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So the important part there is that, you know, it's an emotional, psychological and social well-being that needs to be looked after in a mental health sphere. And the other definition that we look at is mental illness. A mental illness is defined as a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling or mood. Such condition may affect someone's ability to relate to others and function each day. Each person will have different experiences, and even people with the same diagnosis. And that's quite interesting to note, that you can have two individuals with exactly the same diagnosis, and they could completely have different symptoms. And that is why it's so difficult to pick up things. And you would see then that a psychiatrist would make a diagnosis on a patient and say this patient is having this and this and this problem. Then that patient can go to another psychiatrist and he could make completely a different diagnosis. And then he would even go to a third psychiatrist and he could have another diagnosis. So because we're working with human beings, it is not an exact science. We cannot go and plot everything with maths. Human beings are very intrigued and very difficult to understand. And it makes it very difficult then to try and put a label to this problem. And that is why we as IFATCA and GATSCA and IFALPA feel that the amount of trouble and money and things that's going to need to be spent on trying to curb this so-called problem is almost impossible. We will not make it safer at the end of the day. So the other definition is mental fitness is defined as the modifiable capacity to utilize resources and skills to flexible, adapt to challenges and advantages, enabling thriving. So if you look at the three different definitions that we have, they're talking about mental illness, which is kind of very negative because, you know, it's like you're a sick person, you know, there's something wrong with you. Then they talk about mental health, which is, it's got a little bit better connotation to you. It's like you're not completely bad, you know, you have maybe a condition, but we can help you. And then looking at mental fitness. Now that encompasses basically the other two, but it's got a little bit of a nicer tone to it, because if you think about fitness, physical fitness, you're unfit and you can become better. Mental fitness, you are a little bit sick now, but you can become better. So we as an organization, we like to use, or we subscribe to this term because we see it as a positive term that would enhance the understanding of that you can become better. You just need to seek help in the end of the day. The DSM-5, that's a very big word that I just need to get here. This is the Bible that actually dictates to healthcare professionals on conditions. It's written by the American Psychiatric Association of the Manual of Mental Disorders in 2013. So this manual gets updated every about 2 to 3 years. As the doctors get to understand health issues better, they then try and formulate it in such a way, and then they publish it in this document, and all the healthcare professionals that work with mental issues have this document to try and standardize the method of labeling different diseases so that people understand what they have, because of, you know, like I said, you know, you could have a symptom, you could have a symptom, completely different symptoms but the same disease. Now what happens is that the ICD-10 codes is the codes that they use to diagnose you. So they would put a code onto the diagnosis which then explains what you have. They then submit this to the medical aids and you get labeled of having some kind of mental health disease. So as soon as you get that disease or as soon as you get that label with this code, your insurance picks it up and then you will lose your license. As an air traffic controller or as a pilot, you will then immediately lose your license. There are certain conditions that you immediately lose your license. So people are scared. Air traffic controllers and pilots are scared to, if they feel depressed or they have any kind of mental issues, to actually go to a healthcare professional. And that is where the danger comes in, because we should ask for help. The system should be there that we could ask for help, and then get our jobs back, because it can be treated. There is certain kinds of drugs available that can help people. Yes, there is protocols that need to be followed to get this done safely, but it can be done, and it can be done safely in pretty much about 80% of the conditions. So this ICD-10 codes then, you know, goes further. They call it the F codes. It would go with a major disorder, and then they will take it further and further and further with commas and points and things to if you have a let's say a psychotic you won't be able to fix that. Okay, let's say you have you're a little bit hypertensive or a little bit anxious about things. So you get different degrees. So you can either be extremely or just mildly. And they then would then say on what severity you have the problem. And on that severity they will then try and treat you. So what needs to happen is that the air traffic controllers and the pilots, as I said, should have the freedom to be able to go to a healthcare professional. And what we try and advocate is that every year that you go for your medical, you should be able to go and tell your doctor that's doing your aviation medical that I am feeling anxious, or I'm not sleeping at night, or there is symptoms that can be picked up. And if you can freely discuss that with your doctor, and he can then say, listen, this and this I'm not worried about, but that maybe we should get that checked. Let's send you to a aviation psychologist. And that is the important part, as well as using an aviation psychologist that understands the problems of aviation, and that you can lose your license if things are done in a wrong way. And then if you've been checked out, and he might find that you are a little bit anxious, and it could be a problem, at least then they can have drugs that you can use, and they can put you on a protocol, and in 6 months' time or in a year's time, you can get your job back. But at least you are protected and secured. Without asking for help, it will just spiral out of control. And eventually you are a danger to your colleagues, and you're a danger to yourself. And then you're definitely going to lose your job at the end of the day. So challenges that we have with mental assessments is the variety of psychiatric conditions that exist. So there's a huge amount of different conditions that exist, and to try and label that equally is quite difficult, especially in aviation psychology. That is such a new field that you can't even go study aviation psychology in South Africa. You become a psychologist and then somehow get involved in aviation and then call yourself an aviation psychologist, because there is no field as aviation psychology in South Africa at this stage. Diversity of presentations, it's the different people showing the different symptoms. Potentially rapid fluctuations of severity. One morning you can stand up and you are perfectly, and the next morning you can stand up and you can't even get out of bed because of depression. Lack of firm statistical data about the effects of these disorders on one's function. Now, looking at air traffic control and pilots, this is a complete new thing. It's only been in the spotlight for the last 2 years. So there is no statistical data to say that, 10% of pilots has mental issues, or 10% of air traffic controllers have mental issues. We don't have any data on that. So we can't really make educated decisions on what is really the big problem we have at this stage. Okay, the best we can actually do at this stage, not knowing anything, because we are in the dark. We are really in the dark. We don't really know where to. We know that it can be a problem. We know ICAO wants it to be addressed. The medical fraternity is feeling it's a knee-jerk reaction, because we had a loss of a lot of lives in one accident. So they feel it needs to be addressed. They don't really know how to address it, to be honest with you. I went to a medical conference about 2 or 3 months back, and the only thing they could talk about there is how are we going to address it, and nobody had answers. Everybody knew that, okay, maybe it's a problem, but we don't know what we're going to do about this problem. So what should we do? We should try and keep our mental state as sound as possible. So there's a few tips that we can follow. Connect with others. Be out there. Meet people. Be friendly. Do what you need to do. Take time to enjoy life. Don't just work. Don't work until 10 o'clock at night. Take leave. Just have a balanced life. Participate and share interests. So you can, there's a lot of things that you can do. Participate in different activities. If you and your wife have shared interests, do the things together. Contribute to your community. That's the feel-good feeling you have when you do something for the community. It's always good to feel appreciated. And I think that's probably one of the things that we need to do, is to make other people also feel appreciated. So if somebody does something good at work, tell them that you're doing something good at work, because they feel appreciated and it lifts the spirits up. Obviously, take care of yourself. Go for jogs. It's not just taking care of yourself in a physical way, but obviously in a mental way as well. Go for massages and all that kind of things. Challenge yourself. That's always good to try and get a new skill. Go do a language course. although that can also bring other stresses involved. Deal with stress. I don't think people actually know they have stress sometimes, because I'm an air traffic controller and they say it's supposed to be one of the most stressful jobs in the world. For me, it's almost relaxing. I go to work to get away from house. It's stressful being at the house. I think probably one also gets taught how to observe stress. But we do have stress. I mean, it's one of those things that, when you have bad nights at night, you battle to sleep. That's actually because of stress. One thing, maybe it's some other things, but normally that's an indication that you have a little bit of stress. Rest and refresh, that's important, is that, you need to sleep enough, take care of yourself, and then notice the here and now. Don't let life go past you. You only have one chance at this, so use it. Do get that bucket list and start working through it. Don't just put on and put on and put on. Do what you do the nice things in lives as well. And then the most important thing is ask for help. If you have a problem or you feel that you need to address something, ask for help. In the long run, that's the thing that's going to save you, is asking for help. As an air traffic controller, we have CISM programs, we have the CARE program, and there's quite a lot of programs out there. It's worthwhile asking for help. Keeping quiet is not the answer. There's a lot of challenges in the aviation and air traffic control and in the pilot fraternity to work on this, to get it right. It's not going to be fixed in the next probably hour or 5 years. It's going to take a long time. But we need to work on this. We need to get an answer on this, because at the end of the day, we are air traffic controllers and pilots are only humans. Life happens. Things can go wrong, and you can become depressed or you can become anxious, or it just happens. And that is it. I think we have a little bit more time for questions this time round. Any questions? No question. For me to answer, if I had to guess, I would probably say no, because he's doing it for a religious outcome. So, there's a lot of things that people can get brainwashed quite easily, actually. So if you get told the same thing over and over and over, and especially when it comes to a religious outcome, one can do crazy things. So I wouldn't, and this is definitely not it's not an academic answer that I'm giving you. This is just my thought, my thinking process, that I don't think that they are mentally ill. I think they actually know exactly what they're doing. I think that they are probably brainwashed, and they are probably very scared when they do it. Yeah.